Good evening and welcome to No Soul Left Behind special report on the Amazon Synod. I'm Laura Brockway.
And I'm Jennifer Sinclair. Today is Sunday, October 27th, 2019, the Feast of Christ the King.
Tonight we are going to talk to our guest George Neumayr. He's the author of The Political Pope and contributing editor of the American Spectator.
So we know that we're going to get lots of questions and comments. Please type your comments and questions in. We'll get to them. We'll try to get to them all during the program, but leave them there because we will definitely get to all of your questions and comments throughout the show and after. Yeah.
Okay, let's start by invoking our Blessed Mother. I want to pray one Ave Maria to invoke the Blessed Mother right away. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus nunc et in hora mortis nostra. Amen. Christus vincit. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right, now we're going to bring on our guest, George Neumayr. Hello, George. There
Hi.
he is. Hi, George. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, you know, of course, there's social media is buzzing. Everything's been buzzing. And you were at the Amazon Synod, at least for a little while in the beginning. Can you, first of all, let's start out for anyone who is been under a rock and doesn't know what's going on. Can you give us a little quick recap of some of the events of the last 3 weeks in Rome?
Sure. Yeah, I was in Rome for a good 10 days. So I was at the beginning of the Synod, and really the tone for the Synod was set by that event in the Vatican Gardens at the very beginning of the Synod. It was on the Sunday. It was on the eve of the Synod. The Pope had a number of Amazonian activists come into the Vatican Gardens, and they ended up performing what amounted to a pagan ritual in accordance with their Amazonian traditions and superstitions, and they brought into the Vatican Gardens the Pacha idols, the Pachamama, the nature goddess that would become so controversial, and the idols representing her would eventually be thrown into the Tiber, this last week. But I would say that event in the Vatican Gardens really set the tone for the Synod, and it made it very clear that the Synod was going to be a syncretistic event, that it was going to be an attempt to blend Amazonian paganism with some form of Catholicism, which of course you can't do. You know, that's idolatry and Catholicism cannot be combined, and that's an obvious violation of the First Commandment. But nevertheless, I would say that event was a very defining event for the Synod. But then, as the Synod got going and the meetings were held within the Vatican, it became very clear that most of the participants, most of the organizers of the event and the leading participants in the event are dissenters from Catholic teaching. They support, the chief organizer of the event is Claudio Humes, an archbishop from Brazil, and he's a very outspoken opponent of church teaching on issues like homosexuality. He's very much in favor of women deacons, and so people like Humes were it became very clear that they were running the event. And the German bishops, of course, have had a very heavy hand in the Synod, and they largely paid for the Synod. You know, the German relief agencies connected to the German bishops, they poured millions and millions of dollars into the Synod, and it was the German bishops who flew in all of the activists from the Amazon to come and put on what amounted to a propaganda show that was held at a church named Santa Maria in Traspotina, which is very close to St. Peter's Square. And it was there in that church that I found that picture of an Amazonian woman nursing a dog or a pig, and that too kind of set the tone for the event, because it just illustrated that this synod was not about holiness, or it's not about strengthening Catholicism or evangelization. It's about pushing environmentalism, and it's about pushing an alliance between the United Nations and the Vatican. And it's more about politics. It was obviously much more about politics than theology.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the final draft, or the concluding document of the synod, which we got a glimpse of yesterday, is very much in favor of married priests, female deacons, and it basically extols syncretism. It basically it pushes the idea that instead of evangelizing the Amazonians, the church should instead be learning from the Amazonians. It should be showing respect to a culture that is essentially pagan. And so really it ended as it began. It began in the Vatican Gardens with paganism, and it really ended with paganism.
And are you aware of any attempt? Did you witness anything whatsoever that of an attempt to evangelize the indigenous people instead of to bring their faith into our church? Yeah,
there's no evidence whatsoever that this Pope has wanted to evangelize them at all. In fact, the synod was misnamed. It was a misnamed synod. Just like the synod on the family had nothing to do with strengthening the family, and instead weakened the family by advancing adultery and by endorsing adultery. Similarly, this evangelization synod has had the effect of undermining evangelization. And it wasn't about introducing Catholicism to Amazonians. It really was about the church showing respect to Amazonian paganism. And it's not really like this Pope tends to use words in an Orwellian way. They always end up meaning the exact opposite of what they sound like. So evangelization is really his euphemism, not for introducing the faith to non-Christians. It's a euphemism for surrendering the faith and accepting false religions. And similarly, the synod on the family, when he said, we'll hold this synod on the family to strengthen the family. Well, it obviously did not strengthen the family. It was a synod that culminated in a document that encouraged alternative lifestyles that undermine the family.
The war is on the family, and we've seen it. And the Amazonians, if there was no attempt to evangelize them, and the way the Vatican has made it sound, that frankly they've just made them sound like they aren't intelligent enough to in any way comprehend Catholicism. So it's not even being offered to them. So it's okay that you just do all of your pagan things, which I have a really hard time believing that the indigenous peoples are indeed that stupid. If that is the case, then they do not even know what is going on. And if that is not the case, they've got to be offended that they've been exploited, because they still probably don't even know what's going on. And I think, I was going to touch on one point you said earlier. I apologize. I heard it described, and it sounds very true. The UN has hijacked the papacy, and it's really the entire Vatican. And you can see the things playing out in the church the exact way they've been playing out in our country and in our world, the exact same tactics. just blind us with things that are completely against our beliefs, and then point the finger at us as bigots when we can't accept it.
I found when I was in Rome, it was very striking the number of United Nations officials who were at the synod. Rome was really like crawling with all these UN observers. In fact, somebody pointed out that there were probably more UN observers than bishops at the synod, and that's not a coincidence. This really was an attempt by the Vatican to give the United Nations leverage in the Amazon. They want the United Nations to go into the Amazon and push, and conduct all of their environmentalist and socialist and immoral projects. And it's really, the synod in a way was a sort of power grab against all the countries in Latin America where the Amazonians reside. And it's an attempt to sort of carve out of those countries an Amazonian region that the United Nations and their friends at the Vatican could control. And I think that's what this is about. It wasn't about evangelizing the Amazonians. It was an excuse to use the Amazonians to tighten the alliance between the United Nations and the Vatican. And that's really what it's about. So when you're in St. Peter's Square now, it's interesting. It feels more like the United Nations Plaza than a Catholic pilgrimage site. And that statue, one of the unveiling of that statue, which is a tribute to illegal immigration, that's now the first statue to be in St. Peter's Square in centuries. And it's a statue that has absolutely nothing to do with the faith. It's the kind of statue that you'd see in the United Nations Plaza in New York City. And it's a terribly misplaced statue for St. Peter's Square. It makes the church just look like an annex of the United Nations.
Well, that is the goal for them.
Yeah. It's going to become an Epcot center for the world.
That's right.
Yeah. So the Vatican seems to me like it's less a pilgrimage site now than a kind of quasi-religious Disneyland, a theme park where the church is sort of treated like a museum. And the real Catholicism is treated like a relic, and the new Catholicism is just this lowest common denominator, United Nations style, minimalist
one world religion.
And so it's really that we're seeing this Pope take Catholicism out of Catholicism and reduce it to something very insipid, and as somebody said, the salt. When the salt has lost, Jesus said, when the salt has lost its flavor, what good is it? What good is a church that becomes just an instrument of the United Nations? At that point, the church becomes not a savior of the world, but a menace to the world.
Tool of, a tool of the world. Well, God will not be mocked, and the supernatural will win out. How far is it going to go before? I don't know, but we just see all of these things playing out to the point of, as I was thinking today, I was just thinking of basically half the church, we are schismatic Catholics, because at this point, if you are not willing to openly worship a false idol, you are not in line with Rome. So where do we go going forward? I don't know. We just have to pray and keep highlighting and telling people what's going on in the media, because half of the entire flock is in the Valley of Dry Bones and doesn't see any of it. That was my point.
And poor China, they're trapped.
And that'll be the rest of us soon too.
Yes.
Yeah. It's I heard senior prelates say that there's no faith left in Rome. There's really the salvation or the preservation of the faith depends upon the laity, and it depends upon good priests. but are at the highest levels of the church, you know, the faith is really gone, and the Vatican is under enemy occupation, and so we have to. I think we have to push the cardinals to stand up to this bad pope, and basically they have to resist him and prevent him from damaging the faith irreparably.
Yeah.
And a few of them have. I know Bishop Schneider spoke out, and a couple of others have been speaking out and calling for fasting and prayer. And I know it's not easy for them, but you know, these are the leaders that we need. So please, bishops, please, the faithful need to hear the truth. We're out here trying to tell them the truth, and we need you to tell them the truth too. Yeah,
but the cardinals really have the power to stop this, to stop Francis from destroying the church, you know, and they need to step up. They need, you know, we need more than just a couple of cardinals. You know, it's not enough to have a Cardinal Burke or Cardinal Muller. We need 10, 15, 20 cardinals to band together and stand up to this bad pope and prevent him from destroying the church.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Laura?
You know, we have some questions from a couple of people, and Jennifer, I wanted to, Tom Flaherty asked a question. Jennifer, can you read it? Because it kind of fits into here about good guys in Rome. So go ahead and read it now.
From Tom Flaherty?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just how Bergoglioed is the Vatican right now? Do you have any friends left on the inside besides the obvious ones like Burke and Schneider and Sarah?
Well, I would say that the number of friendly, you know, people who are friendly with journalists like myself, it's, you know, it's a vanishingly thin number. And the truth is that all the people around Bergoglio, they're very determined modernists, and they have complete and total contempt for faithful Catholics. You know, they see us as the enemy, and so
it's like they're using the church against us.
Yeah, so I made an attempt. I actually saw one night I was in Rome, and I saw Cardinal O'Malley and Cardinal Joseph Tobin and Bishop McElroy eating dinner. And after they completed their dinner and they were walking back to the Vatican, I went up to them and I tried to ask them real questions about the synod and about the faith. And they, you know, completely stiff-armed me. You know, they made it clear that they weren't going to answer any of my questions. And it just sort of captured the gulf that exists between the leadership or the hierarchy of the church and the rank and file Catholics, for whom the hierarchy, you know, they have no time and they have no patience.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I do remember that. In fact, I don't remember which one, but he was actually at least attempted to be kind to you, and where the others totally ignored you and said, "Get out of my way."
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Colonel Dolan last week, but yeah.
Cardinal O'Malley, I guess, yeah. Cardinal O'Malley was he was sort of playing good cop, and he engaged me a little bit, but he wouldn't answer the questions. You know, I was asking a serious question, and they just blew me off. So, and that's what they've been doing to faithful Catholics for 50 years. You know, everybody's had the experience of like writing a letter to the bishop and being ignored, or writing, you know, making a complaint and you never get a hearing. You know, the communications office at most chanceries exists not to communicate with the faithful, but to prevent communication with the faithful.
Right.
Absolutely, that's the bubble, and the thing is, that is the narrative of the modernists, is just like they said about the Pachamamas, they'll be retrieved to the point of dialogue, or this is about dialogue. They made no attempt that I'm aware of at any attempt at dialogue with those of us offended by that, or by the the suckling of the beast, which right out of the gate had me floored, and I didn't even think they were going to be able to shock me, and lo and behold. So time and time again,
this is not
they're
a
just mocking
pontificate
us.
of dialogue. This is not a pontificate of dialogue. It's a pontificate of monologue. You know, we're subjected to these lectures from the Pope about how we're bad Catholics because we adhere to tradition and we, you know, subscribe to the actual dogmas of the church, and we take, you know, we take the history of the church seriously. But you know, he treats us like we are lepers, and you know, he's always calling us names. He's calling us rigid and pharisaical and neurotic, and you know, he tells the parents of big families, don't behave like rabbits, and you know, he's always insulting.
It's very insulting.
Very offensive, yes.
And
we are not compromising the truth. We are not compromising our beliefs, and that is why he has to attack us, because we're not compromising the truth. So
right.
He can't get us to blend with the Amazonians if we don't compromise the truth, and he won't even go out to extend our beliefs to them. So it's completely one-sided. There's no dialogue going on. The only way you can even get their attention is to do something like what happened with the Pachamamas going into the Tiber. At least that gets their attention. Money's the only language they speak at all. So I hope everybody cut off money to them long ago. But, you know, what was the climax today? Wasn't there several women promoted to positions of clergy or something at the very end as the grand finale nail in the coffin?
Well, it's pretty clear that in the final document, or the Pope's reflection on the synod, he'll ratify married priests in the Amazon, and then he'll also, no doubt, give his support to women deacons. So you know, and I'm sure that also his exhortation will include a big section on how we have to respect non-Christian belief systems, which, you know, that amounts to a religious relativism that all of his predecessors condemned. You know, so the very thing that Benedict XVI condemned, the dictatorship of relativism, that's what we're now living under, and that's really now becoming the new orthodoxy is heterodoxy. The new orthodoxy is this dictatorship of relativism that this Pope that obviously espouses.
In other words, chaos is the new rule.
Yeah.
Speaking of chaos, Yolanda Rodriguez would like to know, when do you think we will know what will be approved after these meetings are over with and they start looking at everything they've written down and done and studied?
Well, the Pope today said that, you know, he wants to write an exhortation in light of the synod, and he said he didn't give a time frame as to when that exhortation would be completed, but it's assumed that it'll be done either by the end of this year or by early next year. And so we'll find out. Yeah, and then, you know, after he does the exhortation, and if he says that, yeah, it's okay for the bishops in the Amazon to experiment with married priests, what would follow at that point would be changes to canon law, I assume.
Yeah. Probably a brand new catechism too. That would be, I mean, that should
Well, I'm sorry, but I will never comply. I will not comply. I'm sorry.
That's right. No way. Okay, let's see another question. I'm not quite sure of her words anymore because I read them I wasn't concentrating on this kind of thing. Hopefully you or someone in the audience will know. Christine Saracino asked is this synod related to any prophetic words of Our Lady of Good Success to who spoke to Mother Mariana de Jesus?
I can't answer that question because
Okay.
I'm not.
Yeah, I'm interested.
And I'm not either.
I know we'll go back and read all about it. I
Okay.
remember hearing something about Our Lady of Good Success. There were some prophetic words. So now
Let's ask Christine to explain that on the threads, because I just copy pasted that question from her, Jennifer. There's no confusion on it.
It's
So
okay.
let's ask Christine to explain that, because I think she's relating it. So Christine, explain that to us. And you could go on. Jennifer, next.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other ones?
Yes, there are.
What about from Tim Ahern? You got some good ones from Tim Ahern.
Good ones come from Tim Ahern, who says, ask George about the latest insights on the Shamsonian Synod.
Which we are doing now. Was there anything new that happened? Any last minute sticking it to us that you heard about yet, George?
Well, I mean, the fishing the idols out of the Tiber and rebuking the Catholics who supported that removal. That really was a kind of in-your-face gesture by the Pope.
No doubt about it.
His contempt for faithful Catholics can't be any clearer, and it just underlines that this whole synod has been just one massive violation of the first commandment, which is, God said, "Do not place strange gods before me."
Exactly. I am your Lord. Your God.
How can you possibly square that commandment with the pagan rituals at the Vatican Gardens, with this propaganda show at Santa Maria and Transpatina, with Pachamama images and idols being spread throughout Rome? It's that this is a clear direct affront to God, to the triune God, and I don't think that I don't think those who remove the idols from that church will have much to answer for on Judgment Day. But I think the clerics and hierarchy that thought it was a good idea to put those idols in that church, they will have to explain to God how that, how they honored the first commandment by doing that.
I have the.
Don't you feel like in many ways this is Sister Lucia's vision playing out of half of Rome in ruins and bishop against bishop? And I mean, it just feels like spiritually, if you can see half of Rome like you did, just feels like that's the spiritual battle laid out right there. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Tim, it's exactly what we're talking with George about. About the statues of the Pachamama, how they reappeared, and will they catch the Catholic Maccabees who, threw them in the Tiber? And I don't know exactly who he is. Maybe the Maccabees. He was asked to leave the church that had other pagan images. What happened with that one?
I think he's asking George. Was George asked to leave a church, other church, and what happened with that?
At Santa Maria in Transpatina, I did ask a docent, a representative of the synod, to explain that picture of the woman nursing the animal. And the guy talked to me. He talked to me maybe for 2 or 3 minutes, and then this thuggish priest in the back of the church saw what was happening, and I think he suspected that the interview was not going to put the synod in a good light, and so he immediately shut it down and told the other docents to ask me to stop filming.
Wow. So the next question: did you get many photos and videos?
Yeah, I tried to everything that I thought was newsworthy, I tried to capture on video or in a picture. But really, the Pachamama and the breastfeeding mother, those were really most outrageous images from the synod.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And anyone who's confused about that, go ahead, Jennifer.
You know, I'm Cajun, right? So what I saw was a distempered possum, not a dog or.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what it was. It really does not matter what it was. We are not beasts. We are not beasts. It does not matter what it was. So
I know, but it just felt even more slap in the face.
It was really offensive to Our Lady, no matter what. They are really offensive to me as a woman. This whole entire agenda is about blurring the lines between everything, between our, if they've blurred the lines, then our own saints that we rely on and our symbols and meditative tools, they are slipping away from us. But the real point is that the supernatural, they cannot take away the supernatural, because that is all up to God. So they can do all of these things, and souls are in peril. But we know who wins this thing, so we mustn't get discouraged. But it's hard to watch.
I think that's the real purpose of the synod is to deny the hierarchical character of reality as God established it, and to, as you're saying, blur the lines, and to make, put everything on the same level, and to treat all experience, all religious experience, as if it's the same, when we know from our faith that religion is not something that is generated by us. It's something that it's received by us. It doesn't come up from human beings. It comes down from God. And yet this synod tried to reverse that, and to say that the subjective religious experience of Amazonians is as worthy of respect as Christian belief, and that's a complete bald-faced heresy. Because
absolutely,
you can't say that if the triune God exists, then all these idols are false gods that take us away from the real God, and thereby prevent us from uniting with the real God, and in that way they cause us to lose our soul.
Amen. Yeah.
Amen. And the peoples of the Amazon certainly deserve to be baptized and saved, or at least have it offered to them. And I find that this entire synod has been degrading to them, because frankly the Vatican has made them look too stupid to breathe in and out, and I don't believe they are that dumb. I believe they're being exploited completely. And if I were they, I would just want to get out of there and go back to my jungle. And I don't blame them. In fact, sometimes I want to run away to a jungle to get away from the insanity. So, but, they still deserve to have the faith offered to them. And ultimately, it is their choice, but don't treat them like they are too dumb to understand it or accept it or practice it, because Jesus didn't make anyone who can't if you beg for the grace for it. But we need to teach them how they need to bring the faith into their world.
One of the bishops at the synod said infamously that the Amazonians are incapable of understanding celibacy, and that should be regarded as a massive insult. That they're so naturalistic.
Like they're animals. They're treating them like animals, like you're not capable.
Yeah, that they're incapable of any kind of higher thoughts, or recognizing that this world might not be the only world. That there's a world beyond this world that religious life could be the symbol of. That just to say that they're incapable of understanding that is to say that they're like animals or little children. And
that's exactly it. And that's how they have portrayed them, by the suckling of the beast, and saying that they aren't capable of understanding natural law like a human understands, and they're treating them like cavemen or something. But it's so incredibly degrading. So, I mean, I just want to take a second to apologize from my own heart to all of the indigenous peoples of the Amazon for having been degraded, publicly exploited, and used. And I'm so sorry that this happened to you. The church is kind of screwing all of us.
Yeah. And George, before my last questions from Tim, I feel like these people are intentionally being formed into victims that, you know, they are the new victims.
Being exploited.
We were concentrating on, because we lose our victims when they come to America and all of a sudden they're surviving, they have jobs, and then so they wake up. And so now we need a new set of victims. But the last question from Tim, it's about, what are you thinking about the corruption at our national basilica? And that's the last.
That might not be.
Tim, I know it may not make any, if it isn't, if you're not ready to.
First of all, before we talk about that, I'm happy to talk about the National Shrine, but just to finish up about the synod first, because I do want to hear about that, George. I've been watching your post. Mm-hmm. But first of all, our producer is cutting in on all of us, and he just wants us to say it and know it. We do not have to follow anything that is not from God. Ken wants us to know it and say it, and it's true. We do not and should not, and it's blasphemous to do so. So I personally will not comply. So Kent was telling us all to say that. So and that's what these idols are. That's what these things are. But I apologize for busting in there on that one with Kent. But go ahead, Jennifer, if you had anything else. And then if nothing else on the synod, I'm happy to have George talk about what's going on a bit at the National Shrine, because the corruption is deep. It's everywhere. And
okay, I'm checking out.
Okay,
let's see. Maybe just a couple of
comments. We can go ahead. George, tell us what's going on at the National Basilica and all of this stuff that this other project of yours.
Okay.
Jennifer.
Thing about the Our Lady of Good Success to Mother Mariana.
Yeah. We'll read that later, Jennifer. Okay. Yeah. She did text it to me too, and I will read it later. But George, what's going on at the National Basilica?
Well, the Monsignor Walter Rossi, who runs the National Shrine, he's under investigation by the Diocese of Scranton and by the Archdiocese of Washington, and that investigation is ongoing. And so we don't know yet, how that investigation is going to conclude. But it's one of the bad signs for Rossi is that he had to step down, or he had to take a leave of absence from the Catholic University of America, where he sits on the board. And it was pretty clear from the negative comments made by the Catholic University crowd that they were trying to distance themselves from Rossi and basically say he has nothing to do with Catholic University. He just had this sort of ceremonial seat on the board. And what I deduced from those comments is that he's probably on his way out at the shrine. I know that the bishops are going to be meeting in November. The board of trustees for the shrine will meet in November, and I assume that Rossi is going to be asked to step down because he's a horrible advertisement for the National Shrine. I can't imagine people continuing to give money to a Marian shrine that is in the hands of a member of the gay mafia. As Vigano, I've done reporting which shows that, but then Vigano came along and he backed me up and he said, I know for a fact that this guy is a member of the gay mafia, because when I was the nuncio in Washington, D.C., I got complaints about how he was gay sexual harasser. And who you know, do national Catholics and do the bishops, do they really want the foremost Marian shrine in the United States of America to be in the hands of a gay sexual harasser? You know, and this and that's, you know, that's just one area of misconduct by Rossi. There are many others which I've been documenting in my articles. You know, he lives just like his mentor, Bishop Bransfield, who got into trouble for financial and sexual misconduct. You know, Rossi has been living this sort of double life where he you know, plays the rector at the shrine during the day, but then at night he's got all these different residences. He's got a place down in Florida. He's got a beach condo in Florida. He had one in Atlantic City. He had an apartment at one time in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. So he's got multiple residences. He's actually the treasurer of his condo I'm blanking on the name, Fort Lauderdale. He's the condo. He has luxurious. He owns this luxurious beach condo with another priest, and
he's the
treasurer. He's the treasurer at that huge condo building. It's a luxury high rise, and he's the treasurer. So somehow he has time to be the treasurer of this luxury high rise in Florida, while serving as the rector at the Basilica in Washington, D.C. So, and he's actually an incarnated priest of Scranton. That's why the Diocese of Scranton is investigating him, is that that's where he was ordained. And he's been AWOL from Scranton for about 20 years. And I know from a lot of the priests up there that they're complaining and saying, why does Bishop Bambera just let Rossi do whatever he wants, you know, and live this sort of lavish double life where he's jetting down to Fort Lauderdale and he has, you know, a place in Atlantic City and he's you know, jetting off to Rome and he's, you know, God knows, you know, if somebody did an investigation of the shrine finances under Rossi, I think they would find a lot of the same kind of offenses that Bransfield committed, you know, which is, you know, I know that one of the things they're looking at is how much Rossi pays himself as the rector of the shrine and how much he pays subordinates and things like that, and how much he pays on travel so I think he's very vulnerable, and you know, it's the shrine basically needs a fresh start. You know, he's been there for 16 years. He's been using the shrine as like his personal fiefdom for 16 years, and because of his connections to Bransfield and McCarrick was the one who put him in that position. You know, it's clear that the shrine needs a fresh start, and they need somebody who's not who doesn't have such unsavory associations.
Wow. That's incredible. And you know, the corruption is so deep. And I'm just sitting here listening to your story and thinking, yes, they do need a fresh start. And knowing my own experience in the church, and it's funny because some people call me ecumenical, and it doesn't mean that I'm into making us all Protestant, but because I go within different groups in the church, from the Carmelites to the Institute to Cantius to the parishes sometimes, or within the different orders, and I can see how the church is so divided, even within my own. I'm a Roman Catholic in every single one, and everything's so divided. So getting somebody new in there that is not also corrupt is almost impossible, because there's gatekeepers at every turn in the church, and it's really hard to get in anywhere. So, yes.
But at the very least, I mean, I know that we can't expect very much from Wilton Gregory, who's the chairman of the board, and you know, he's the person who will select. He's the person who'd select the next rector. But at the very least, you know, at the very least, they should be able to come up with a priest who's not part of the gay mafia. I mean, you know, doesn't, you know, I mean, aren't people appalled that the top Marian shrine in the country, it has been run by the gay mafia for about 30 years now.
And that bishop has run off at least one very holy priest over, I don't know if it's not the same ordeal, but the gay mafia. So I know the gay mafia is in control there. So, I mean, cleaning house, how do you do it when you don't even have it, you've already run off your good priest and everyone you have is corrupt.
What you're saying, though, about, nothing speaks louder to our cowardly hierarchy than donations that are withheld. And if we make it clear that we're not going to give a dime to the shrine until it's taken out of the hands of the gay mafia, somebody like Wilton Gregory might have to compromise and find and at least a kind of innocuous figure to run the shrine, who's not overtly bad and corrupt. And I'm sure they could find, there's got to be somebody in the Washington in the country that could serve in that role, who doesn't have Rossi's all of Rossi's baggage.
And you're right. Money is the only language they understand, and I mean, at a minimum, stop the gravy train. But that's the only language the church understands, and it is a one-way street. So that doesn't mean that everyone in the church is corrupt, but you have to stop the cash flow because it reaches the hierarchy. That's who gets your money. So, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
I know I'm looking at the time, but
yes.
One question, it's kind of the last question and then a comment. From Roger Bouchard, whose question for George: if a conclave of a few faithful cardinals were to elect a pope, could this be the solution to the present crisis and bring back the glory of the church? Is this a possibility?
I would need to study that matter. I know that I've heard people talk about how an imperfect council could be held, and I just don't, I haven't studied that issue thoroughly enough to really offer a good answer to that question.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, another thing for everybody to learn, so that's a good thing. And Laura, did you want to ask George about his book and how?
Well, we were going to ask George just, I want one more thing, and then I'm going to ask George to tell us where he can get his book. But first of all, I mean, we have to think of, what are we supposed to do now? And so I just wanted to mention, too, one thing that I am doing and that I have called on prayer warriors to do. We started an emergency novena to St. Paul, who converted so many unbelievers. And, it occurred to me we aren't invoking Saints Peter and Paul here enough in this whole entire war. At least I hadn't been. So check my Facebook. We're doing day 3, and you can either catch up with us or just start it all over yourself, or Google Novena to St. Paul Center, because I really believe that we need somebody who can really come and kick some right now, and that's St. Paul. So also St. Anthony, I was reading about today, who we know of that is the hammer of heretics, but he's also had a few miracles where he was seen come down from the sky as more of a military might. So we need to invoke him too. Other than that,
yeah.
I was going to ask George to just tell us where we can find your book, The Political Pope, George.
Oh yeah, you can still buy it on Amazon. So if you just go to Amazon.com, it's still available. I'm pretty active on Twitter and Facebook, and I advertise it on there as well. And I also have a GoFundMe page. It's George Neumayr's Journalism Fund, and
send George money if you can.
Yeah, because I've been doing this for a long time, and it's not exactly lucrative work, and it actually it's cost me professionally, because my book,
right,
The Political Pope, was kind of blacklisted because I'm seen as a troublemaker now. And so a lot of the establishment publications, they wouldn't review my book.
Oh, wow.
So
we need these brave warriors, and we need to support them. So everyone, if you can, support George's work. He is a freelance journalist, and he is traveling all over, uncovering a lot that's going on. So if you can help him, please do, because he's one of the few people risking his own self. This is not easy even for us. We're not big time like you, George. We're small time, but we get the ridicule. We get it all. We've been ousted by our families. We have had all of the persecution, too, on a smaller level. So, you know, for everybody out there, help George out if you can, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Jennifer, if there's nothing else, or George, did you want to add anything else?
No, I don't. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, my advice to everyone is just pray and fast, because there's not really anything else we can do. But Jennifer, do you want to close with a prayer to St. Michael?
I surely do. Okay. In the name of, let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl through the world, seeking the ruin of souls. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Laura?
Well, thanks
Laura,
to our guest,
Laura?
George Neumayr. Yes, Kent? Yes?
There's one last question from Roger.
Kent.
Okay.
Really quick, George, do you have any new books that you're working on? He was just curious. That's the last question. Anything new going on?
I might, you know, I went down to Buenos Aires earlier this year, and I did some research down there, and you know, I'm hoping that at some point I might be able to do a sequel to The Political Pope, and maybe write a book about the conclusion of this pontificate.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, thanks, George. Thanks, Kent.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we want to thank our guest, George Neumayr, and everyone for watching. And we'll see you here next time on No Soul Left Behind, where we're fighting for every single soul, including yours and mine. Thank you all. God bless you. We love you.